The Christmasaurus by Tom Fletcher, Chapter 19, Bumping into Brenda. They both froze and fell dead silent. Who else could possibly be out in the street in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve? A sniffle sort of sound broke through the cold, quiet air. They heard it again and both knew there was definitely someone else nearby. Who's there? Called William nervously, hoping that no one would reply. The Christmasaurus backed up like a scared puppy until he was almost sitting on William's lap. Then they heard it again. Sniffle, sniffle. Someone was crying. Hello, are you okay? William said kindly in the direction of the sniffly sobs. They seemed to be coming from behind a small bush in the garden of the house in front of which they were standing. Don't come any closer or I'll smash your face in, snapped a snotty, stuffy voice from behind the leaves. William recognised her voice at once. It was the last person he'd ever want to bump into. Brenda Payne. Quick, get out of sight, William whispered to the Christmasaurus. He didn't want Brenda getting a glimpse of his new dinosaur. He had to stay a secret. But this wasn't the Brenda that William was used to. He'd never, ever seen Brenda Payne cry before. He didn't know Brenda had any feelings other than anger, hate and horribleness. This was something he had to see with his own eyes. Are you crying? William asked as he wheeled himself across the snowy pavement towards Brenda's front gate. What are you doing? Go away, I'm completely fine, snapped Brenda. Okay, William shrugged, but just as he was about to wheel himself away, something stopped him. His wheelchair wouldn't budge. He tried to leave again, but he was stuck. Then he realised he was still attached to the dinosaur by the strings of the fairy lights and baubles and tinsel. His eyes followed them to where the dinosaur was standing, and he saw a kind, caring sort of expression on the wonderfully scaly face. The dinosaur couldn't speak, of course, at least not like you and me, but he had feelings just the same, and sometimes feelings are loud enough to be understood better than any words. As William looked into the dinosaur's icy blue eyes, it was as though he could hear his thoughts as clearly as if he were speaking perfect English, with a slight North Pole accent, obviously. The Christmasaurus huffed with his nose, crisscrossed his eyes and nodded his head in Brenda's direction, and William instantly knew what the dinosaur was saying. Girl needs friend. William sighed. He hated to admit it, but the Christmasaurus was right. Every bone in his body wanted to get as far away from Brenda as possible, but no one, not even Brenda, Snotty Pants Payne, deserved to be crying alone in the front garden on Christmas Eve. You stay, William mouthed to the Christmasaurus, who immediately parked his bottom on the snowy street by Brenda's gate like an obedient dog, looking very happy with himself at managing to convince William to help the girl. William unlooped the string of fairy lights from his chair, pushed open Brenda's gate and wheeled himself into her front garden. It was something he never thought he'd do. As he wheeled towards the sound of her sobs and sniffles, he glanced at her house. He'd seen her house many times before, but he usually whizzed by so fast, hoping she wouldn't see him, that he never really paid any attention to it. Now, for the first time, he noticed that it stood out like a sore thumb among the other houses. Whichever way William looked down the street, every house was covered with some sort of Christmas decoration. Some had flashy dancing lights, others just a simple wreath. William's, of course, had just about every Christmas decoration his dad could afford, covering every inch of their wonky little house. But Brenda's was completely bare, dark, cold, utterly unchristmassy. Through the window, William could see no sign of a Christmas tree, no Christmas cards at the fireplace, no wreath at the door, and most of all, no presents. Go ahead, laugh. I know you want to, sobbed Brenda. I don't want to laugh at all, said William truthfully. For William, seeing a house looking so normal at this time of the year was a little creepy. Why don't you have any Christmas decorations? He asked. If I tell you, you'll hate me, said Brenda. I already hate you, said William, so you might as well tell me. Brenda looked up at William, and the corner of her mouth twitched into a tiny smile. William smiled back, and they both let out a little laugh. That was weird. Don't you like Christmas? Asked William. Of course I do, it's her, Brenda said, as she pointed at the figure of a woman pacing around inside the house. William recognised her at once. It was the Scroogey lady he and his dad had passed on their way to the post box a few weeks ago. She was the most serious-looking woman William had ever seen, and had skin as pale as the moon. As William watched her, he noticed she was ripping up pieces of paper. That's my mum, said Brenda. William gasped. Brenda's mum couldn't be any more the opposite of William's dad. She was dressed in old pyjamas, and her expression was more like she was heading to a funeral rather than enjoying Christmas Eve. Even though she seemed seriously serious, William could instantly see where Brenda got her annoyingly perfect prettiness from. Her mother was also very beautiful, or at least she would have been if she didn't look so awfully sad. When William looked closer, he noticed it wasn't paper she was ripping to shreds. They were Christmas cards. Why is she ripping up Christmas cards? William asked. Brenda struggled to get the words out. She hates Christmas. And as she said it, she scrunched up a perfectly round snowball in her hand and launched it at the front of her house. But why? William asked. How can anyone hate Christmas? Does your dad hate it too? Brenda paused with her trembling hand full of a half-made snowball. What is it? William asked, sensing that she was keeping something secret. He glanced quickly at the dinosaur peeping over the wall, who was staring encouragingly back at William. William watched Brenda take a deep breath. Whatever she was about to say was obviously very difficult. I don't have a dad, said Brenda, just like that. Oh, replied William. Well, I do have a dad, but I just don't see him anymore, Brenda explained. My mum and dad got divorced a year ago. 1 year ago exactly, on Christmas Eve. William looked at the cold, dark, undecorated house and began to understand. My mum used to love Christmas, but this year she just says it reminds her too much of Dad, so... Brenda gulped hard and finished rolling the snowball. So this year she cancelled Christmas. As those awful words left her lips, a single teardrop formed in her eye and fell into the snowball she was holding. She quickly threw it at the wall and made another one. William sat thinking about everything he'd just heard. For the first time ever, he actually felt sorry for Brenda Payne. Was this why she was the way she was? William imagined what it would be like if he lived in Brenda's undecorated house with no Christmas at all. It made him shudder. When did your mum and dad get divorced? Brenda asked. William remembered those nasty things she said in school and decided it was about time she knew the truth. My parents aren't divorced, William said. My mum died a long time ago. Brenda froze. Her pale cheeks suddenly flushed red. William guessed she was remembering what she'd said too. It's okay. You didn't know, said William, and he scooped up a handful of snow, packed it into a neat ball and offered it to Brenda. Brenda was too embarrassed to say anything, but sometimes the right words don't exist anymore. She just stood there and cried again. William caught a glimpse of the Christmasaurus eyes peeking over the top of Brenda's wall. The dinosaur looked at Brenda, then back at William, then gave a little nod with his head. Hug. William scooched up his face. There was no way he was going to give Brenda Payne a hug. Nope, no way, not a chance. Then he looked at the girl in front of him, crying in the snow. The Christmasaurus snorted like a horse and frowned at William. Hug. William rolled his eyes. Okay. He wheeled his chair a little closer to Brenda, who was now crying with her face in her hands. He looked at the dinosaur one last time and gave him a look that meant, "You'd better be right about this." Then he took a deep breath, closed his eyes, leant forward with his arms wide open, and gave the meanest girl in the school, possibly the world, a warm, friendly hug. When he opened his eyes, he was shocked to find that Brenda was hugging him back. Then, suddenly, they both dropped their arms and stared at the ground awkwardly. "Don't you dare tell anyone about that," said Brenda. "Don't worry, I definitely won't," replied William. And then he saw the corners of Brenda's mouth rise up into a perfect little smile again. "Thanks though," she said. "I needed that." The Christmasaurus poked his head over and looked at William. "Told you so,"